Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn economics lesson 1, that is gross domestic product. Students, before entering into the lesson, please note down all the points which is presented in this video. Then only you can revise and understand the continuity of the lesson. In this lesson, we are going to learn what is GDP, that is what is gross domestic product, and basic measures of national income, composition of gross domestic product, economic growth and development, and economic policies of GDP. Before knowing the definition of GDP, let me know what is goods, services, and intermediate goods. Imagine what happens in a hotel. You place an order for idlis and a cup of tea. Someone makes idlis and tea someone else serves you. Idlis are tangible, which means physical things you can touch and feel. Such tangible items are called goods. Good is a something you can see and feel. It is something you can use. Next, services. Though you don't realize it, in addition to goods, something else is being produced. The work done by the cooks and the people who serve the food. The activity of cooking and serving is not something you can feel and touch. Such activities are not tangible. So, a service is something done for someone else. Sometimes people are paid for their service, sometimes they are not. So, GDP is the market value. Market value means price at which goods and services are sold in the market. So, it is the market value of all the final goods, that is tangible items, and services, that is intangible, produced in the country during a time period. The GDP measures all the goods and services produced in the country. However, a nation produces a wide range of goods like rice, shoes, milk, train, clock, etc. If only the quantities are taken into account, there is no meaningful way to add these up. For example, how do you add 100 liters of milk with 500 clocks? So, we cannot add the quantity of one type of good with another type of goods, or one type of service with another type of service. Likewise, there is no sensible way to add the qualities of goods produced with those of services produced. How would we add the quantity of clock produced in the country with the service produced by doctor? The GDP solved this problem by measuring the goods and services in the currency of the country, which is the rupee in the case of India. Only the final goods are included in the GDP. Intermediate goods are not counted in calculating the GDP because their value is included in the final goods. Here, intermediate goods is a product used to produce a final good or finished product. So, if the intermediate goods are included in the GDP, it will result in what is called double counting. Next, national income. National income is a measure of total value of goods and services produced by an economy over a period of time, normally a year. It is also called gross national product or national dividend. So, there is various terms associated with measuring of national income. They are GNP, it is gross national product, GDP, gross domestic product, NNP, net national product, NDP, net domestic product, per capita income, that is PCI, PI, that is personal income, DI, that is disposable income. Let me see one by one. First, gross national product. It is called as GNP. It is the total value of goods and services produced and income received in a year by domestic residents of a country. It includes profits earned from capital invested abroad. So GNP is the total value of products produced and income which is earned by the produced product by that country. Next, gross domestic product. It is the total value of output of goods and services produced by the factors of production within the geographical boundaries of the country. That we already saw. It is the market value of all the final goods and services produced in the country during a period. Next, net national product, that is NNP. It is arrived by making some adjustment with regard to depreciation, that is we arrive the net national product by deducting the value of depreciation from GNP. It is calculated by NNP is equal to GNP minus depreciation. Here depreciation means the process of losing value by making some adjustment from GNP. So it is arrived by making some adjustment with regard to depreciate, that is we arrive the net national product by deducting the value of that product. Next, net domestic product, that is NDP. It is a part of gross domestic product. Net domestic product is obtained from the gross domestic product by deducting the quantum of tear and wear expenses. It is also same like net national product. Here it's losing their value by making some adjustment from GDP. Next, per capita income, that is PCI. It is an indicator to show the living standard of people in a country. It is an income earned by a person for his family. It can be calculated by division of national income by population. By this we can find a family income. So, per capita income is an indicator to show the living standard of people in a country. Next, personal income. It is the total money income received by individuals and a household of a country from all possible sources before direct taxes. In this, we can take an income of all the members in a family. If the father and mother also earn means we have to take both because for the calculation of taxes. So, personal income is the total money income received by individuals, that is whole family income. It is calculated by national income corporate income taxes minus undistributed corporate profits minus social security contribution plus transfer payment. Next, disposable income. It means actual income which can be spent or consumption by individuals and families. It is an income which spent to buy a product for his family or for its own purpose. So it can be calculated by personal income minus direct taxes. So these are the various terms associated with measuring of national income, that is GNP, GDP, NNP, NDP, PCI, PI, DI. Next, components of GDP. GDP denotes as Y. Y is equal to C, which means consumption spending by household, plus I, investment spending by business and household, plus G, government purchases of goods and services, plus X minus M, that is net exports or net foreign demand. Gross domestic product, it is produced in the country. GDP of India includes only the market value of goods and services produced in India. For example, the market value of apples produced in Kashmir are included in our GDP since Kashmir is in India. The market value of apples produced in California, even if they are sold in Indian market, are not included in our GDP because it is produced in USA. Next, it is produced during a time period. The GDP of a country measures the market value of goods and services produced only during the specified time period. The goods and services produced in earlier period are not included. In India, the GDP is measured both annually and quarterly. The annual GDP is for a financial year, which is from April 1st to March 31st. So the goods and services produced in earlier period are not included in GDP. So a bicycle produced in 2017 will not be included in the GDP measure for 2018. Next, methods of GDP calculating. It is measured by expenditure approach, the income approach, value added approach. First, expenditure approach. The first way to calculate GDP is to add up all of the money spent on final goods and services. Spending is divided into 4 categories. One is consumption, that is consumer spending on final goods and services is the largest category. Next one is investment. This describes the fact that firms also spend money on final products. It does not mean financial investment. Next, government. It is the government also spend money on final product. The last one is net exports. So some products get brought by other countries, but we must subtract products we buy from other countries. So expenditure approach is calculated by consumption plus investment plus government plus export minus import quality. In this method, the GDP is measured by adding the expenditure on all the final goods and services produced in the country during a specified period. That is, Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Next is how to calculate GDP by income approach. This method looks at GDP from the perspective of the earning of the men and women who are involved in producing the goods and services. The income approach to measure GDP is Y is equal to waves from rent plus interest plus profit. So it is the next way to calculate GDP is to add up all of the income received by firms from the sale of final goods and services. Wage, which means salary. Some of the money earned by firms get paid to workers as wage. Next one is interest. Some of the money earned by firms must get paid to the people who have lent the firm money. Next, rent. It is some of the money must be paid to rent the land user for production. Next one is profit. Once wage, interest and rent have been paid, all of the remaining income is considered as profit. For example, take a house. In a house, father and mother who are earning around 40,000 per month. From this, they can spend for milk, electricity, vegetables, etc. So, the amount spent for the milk is an expenditure for that family and income for milkman. Next, the amount spent for vegetables is expenditure for family and income for seller. The next method is value added approach. In this, value of intermediate goods is equal to value of final goods. For example, take a cup of tea. It is a final good, but in that we can add the intermediate goods like tea powder, milk, sugar, etc. So, each intermediate good, the tea powder, milk, sugar, add value to the final output, that is the cup of tea. In the value added approach, the value added by each intermediate goods is summed to estimate the value of the final good. It is the first way to calculate GDP is to add up the value of all the final goods produced in the country. For example, an economist count only each producer's value added amount. A wheat farmer grows a bushel of wheat that cost is rupees 1. Here there is no intermediator, so it is sold as rupees 1. Next, a miller buys the wheat for rupees 1 to turn into flour, which cost rupees 2 because he brought from farmer as rupees 1, so he had that rupees also. Finally, he make cost as rupees 2. Next, a baker buys the flour for rupees 2 to turn into bread, which cost rupees 5. So he brought for 2 rupees, so he make cost as rupees 5. But in the GDP, our country minus that 2 rupees, they add only 3 rupees to GDP. Next, a grocer buys the bread for 5 rupees to sell it to consumers for 9 rupees. But in our GDP, that 5 rupees can be minus and 4 rupees added to total amount, totally 9 rupees spent for bread. If you add all sales, total rupees 17, but GDP is only value added, which is rupees 9. Next, importance of GDP. When you hear an economist or news reporter talking about the size of an economy, they are most likely referring to GDP. GDP is one of the most important statistics in economics. Measuring GDP tells us an enormous amount about how a nation is doing. If the GDP is rising, it signifies that incomes are rising and consumers are purchasing more. All of this means a stronger economy. GDP is used by economists to determine the health of the economy and whether an economy is growing, as well as measuring the effects of inflation and deflation. On the whole, it is referred as study of economic growth, problems of inflation and deflation, comparison with developed countries of the world, estimate the purchasing power, study of public sector, guide to economic planning. Next, limitations of GDP. The GDP is the most widely used measures of the state of the economy. It includes market transaction only. Several important goods and services are left out of the GDP. The GDP includes only the goods and services sold in the market. So the things which you buy in the market, that only included in the GDP. The services provided by parents to their children is very important and valuable, but it is not included in the GDP because it is not sold in the market. Likewise, clean air, which is vital for a healthy life, has no market value, and is left out of the GDP. It does not account for domestic or voluntary work, even though these activities have a considerable positive impact on social welfare. So the works like babysitting, volunteer work, gardening, trading legal advice, and the works done in the houses like cleaning, taking care of children, taking care of pets. So these works does not included in our GDP. Next, GDP measures only quantity but not quality. The improvement in quality of goods is very important, but it is not captured by the GDP. Only the quantity measures included in the GDP. Next, GDP does not tell us about the way income is distributed in the country, which means the GDP of a country may be growing rapidly, but income may be distributed so unequally. For example, when the top 10% of households earn 80% of the total income in a country, there is a high degree of inequality. GDP does not account for income distribution in any way. For example, among these 10 members, only 2 persons earned more salary, which is equal to other 8 persons. Even though it is an unequal distribution of salary, the GDP of a country may be growing rapidly. So, GDP does not tell us about the way of income is distributed in the country. Next, the GDP does not tell us about the kind of people living. A high level of per capita real GDP can go hand in hand with very low health condition of people, an undemocratic political system, high pollution and high suicide rate. So this GDP does not calculate how the people living, whether they are happy or not. So GDP does not tell us about the kind of life people are living. Do you know the estimation of GDP? The Central Statistical Organization under the Ministry of Statistical Department keeps the records. Its processes involves conducting an annual survey of industries and compilation of various indexes like the index of industrial production, consumer price, etc. Next, sector of Indian economy. So it is classified into primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector. First, primary sector. It is also called agricultural sector. Agricultural sector is known as primary sector in which agricultural operations are undertaken. For example, primary sectors include agriculture like crops, livestock, next fishing, forestry, mineral extractions like oil, mining of coal, iron, etc. So the activity which is directly involved in the nature, that activity is called primary sector or agricultural sector. Next is secondary sector. The economic activity which are related to the manufacturing of process. For example, manufacturing of steel falls under secondary sector. So the product produced from the raw materials, that process is called secondary sector. Industrial sector is secondary sector in which the goods and commodities are produced by transforming the raw materials. Important industries are iron and steel industry, cotton, textile, jute, sugar industry, cement industry, paper, etc. So what is secondary sector involved in? They are involved in using raw materials and other resources for the manufacturing of products. Next, tertiary sector. The activities that help in the development of the primary and the secondary sector is called the tertiary sector. This sector generates services rather than goods. Therefore, this sector is also called service sector. Tertiary sector is known as service sector, which includes government, scientific research, transport, communication, trade, postal and telegraph, banking, education, etc. So the economy is divided into three sectors: primary, secondary and tertiary sector. Primary sector is obtain raw materials from nature, for example agriculture, forestry, etc. Secondary sector is transform raw materials into manufactured materials, and tertiary sector is selling and buying products, services, examples doctor, teachers, etc. So primary sector. Primary sector, we produce goods by exploiting natural resources. It includes any activity involved in the extraction and production of raw materials. Examples: farming, forestry, fishing, mining, etc. Primary sector tends to contribute more in the economies of developing countries as compared to the developed countries. In developed countries, the primary sector has become more technologically advanced, enabling the mechanization of farming and other related activities. These technological advances and investment means less number of people are needed on the field, for so smaller percentage of people are involved primary activities. In developing countries, one of the major problems that the primary sector faces is discussed unemployment. So most of the peoples are engaged in primary sector. Next, secondary sector. Secondary sector includes activity in which natural products are changed into other forms through the way of manufacturing. Examples: manufacturing of sugar, bricks, cloths, etc., food processing industry, oil refinery, many more. It includes both light and heavy industry. This sector often takes the output of the primary sector and manufactures finished goods. It is also called industrial sector. Many of the industries consume large quantities of energy and require factories and machineries which come with added environmental problems and cause pollution. Secondary sector supports both primary and secondary sector. Manufacturing is an important activity to promote economic growth and tends to generate higher GDP. Next, tertiary sector. It is the service sector providing intangible goods such as entertainment, retail, insurance, tourism and banking. This sector also helps primary and secondary sector to grow faster. In developed countries, the tertiary sector is the biggest player in the economy, making maximum contribution to the GDP. Most of the employment opportunities come from this sector only. New technology has enabled new service sector industries to develop. Computer, telephone and internet has enabled a new range of tertiary services. In 21st centuries, the service sector has grown tremendously to increase disposable income. More disposable income enables more spending on luxury services like tourism, restaurant, etc. Okay students, I hope you all understood today's portion. Here I gave some evaluation. Try to answer this question, that is, define national income. What is meant by gross domestic product? What is per capita income? Define value added approach with example. Name the sectors contribute to the GDP with example. Thank you.